In the shadowed depths beneath creation itself, where no divine light penetrates, and where the very air burns with malevolent power, there exists a hierarchy as ancient as sin itself. The seven princes of hell, rulers of the infernal domains, each commanding legions beyond mortal comprehension, represent the ultimate corruption of celestial order transformed into eternal rebellion. These are not mere demons or lesser devils, but the supreme architects of damnation, each embodying one of humanity's greatest weaknesses elevated to cosmic proportions. Their names have echoed through millennia of human fear and fascination, whispered in forbidden grimoires and thundered from pulpits as warnings against the depths to which the soul might fall. The concept of the seven princes emerges from centuries of theological speculation, occult tradition, and popular folklore, weaving together strands from Christian demonology, medieval grimoires, and ancient mythological traditions. Their hierarchy reflects humanity's attempt to understand and categorize the forces of evil that seem to govern the darker aspects of existence. At the apex of this infernal aristocracy stands Lucifer, the morning star, whose very name means light-bearer. Once the most beautiful and powerful of all angels, Lucifer's fall from grace represents the ultimate tragedy of pride and rebellion. His luminous beauty remains unmarred by his corruption, making him perhaps the most dangerous of all the princes, for he appears not as a monster, but as an angel of light. Lucifer embodies the sin of pride, that fundamental arrogance that places the self above all other considerations, even above the divine will itself. His rebellion was not born of ignorance or weakness, but of a calculated decision to place his own glory above that of his Creator. In the infernal hierarchy, he reigns as the supreme ruler, the fallen seraph whose wings once bore him closest to the throne of heaven. The classical tradition speaks of his dwelling in the lowest circle of hell, frozen in ice that reflects not cold, but the absolute absence of divine warmth. Yet other traditions place him upon a throne of fire and shadow, ruling his dark kingdom with the same terrible majesty he once displayed in the celestial court. His power is said to be so vast that even speaking his true name can draw his attention across the veils of reality. Second among the princes stands Mammon, whose name has become synonymous with the worship of material wealth and earthly possessions. This ancient demon prince governs not just greed, but the entire corrupted relationship between humanity and the material world. Where Lucifer fell through pride, Mammon represents the fall through desire for that which can never truly satisfy the soul. Mammon's domain encompasses all forms of avarice, from the merchant who cheats his customers to the ruler who oppresses his people for personal gain. His influence extends beyond mere money to encompass the hoarding of any earthly treasure, the transformation of means into ends, and the reduction of all relationships to transactions of power and possession. In the infernal hierarchy, Mammon commands vast legions of demons specializing in temptation through material desire. His servants whisper of easy wealth, quick profits, and the power that comes from possessing what others cannot have. They understand that greed is not merely about money, but about the fundamental human fear of scarcity and the desperate desire for security through accumulation. Asmodeus, the third prince, rules over the realm of lust and unbridled passion. His dominion extends far beyond mere physical desire to encompass all forms of destructive obsession and the corruption of love into possession. Known as the King of Demons in some traditions, Asmodeus represents the perversion of one of humanity's most powerful and creative forces. The ancient texts describe Asmodeus as having three heads, representing the three aspects of his corrupted nature: human desire, bestial appetite, and demonic cunning. His power lies not in forcing mortals into sin, but in revealing and amplifying the desires already present within them, showing them paths to fulfillment that lead inevitably to destruction and despair. Asmodeus commands legions of succubi and incubi, those demons who specialize in the seduction and corruption of human sexuality. But his influence extends beyond the physical to encompass emotional obsession, the reduction of other beings to objects of desire, and the transformation of love's creative power into a force of domination and destruction. Beelzebub, whose name means Lord of the Flies, represents the fourth prince of hell and embodies the sin of gluttony in its most comprehensive form. This is not merely excessive eating, but the insatiable appetite for consumption of all kinds, the endless hunger that can never be satisfied no matter how much is devoured. In ancient tradition, Beelzebub was a fertility god corrupted into a demon of excess and waste. His transformation reflects humanity's tendency to turn beneficial impulses into destructive compulsions, to take the natural desire for sustenance and survival and corrupt it into endless, meaningless consumption that destroys both the consumer and the consumed. Beelzebub's realm encompasses not just physical gluttony but intellectual and emotional overindulgence as well. He governs the accumulation of experiences without wisdom, the consumption of information without understanding, and the endless seeking of stimulation that ultimately leads to numbness and spiritual death. His followers are those who mistake quantity for quality and volume for substance. The fifth prince, Belphegor, embodies the sin of sloth, but this is not mere laziness as commonly understood. Belphegor represents spiritual inertia, the abandonment of growth and development, and the corruption of rest and contemplation into stagnation and despair. His is perhaps the most insidious of all the deadly sins because it masquerades as harmlessness. Belphegor's influence manifests in the gradual abandonment of effort, the slow erosion of ambition and hope, and the comfortable acceptance of mediocrity and unfulfillment. His servants do not tempt through dramatic sins, but through the gradual cooling of passion, the slow acceptance of good enough, and the comfortable retreat from challenge and growth. In the infernal hierarchy, Belphegor commands demons who specialize in spiritual paralysis, those who whisper that effort is pointless, that change is impossible, and that accepting the status quo is wisdom rather than surrender. His ultimate goal is not the dramatic fall, but the slow fade, the gradual dimming of the human spirit until nothing remains but empty existence. Leviathan, the sixth prince, represents the ancient chaos that existed before creation, now transformed into a force of pure envy and destructive comparison. This primordial demon embodies the sin of envy, that corrosive emotion that poisons happiness by making it dependent on the misfortune of others. The ancient texts describe Leviathan as a massive sea serpent, a creature of such size and power that only divine intervention can constrain its destructive force. In the infernal hierarchy, Leviathan governs all forms of destructive comparison, the inability to find satisfaction in one's own blessings, and the dark joy that comes from witnessing the downfall of others. Leviathan's servants specialize in poisoning human relationships through comparison and competition. They whisper of unfairness of others who have more or better, of the injustice of inequality. They understand that envy is not merely wanting what others have, but actively desiring their destruction so that one's own position might seem better by comparison. The seventh and final prince, Satan, represents wrath in its purest and most destructive form. Often confused with Lucifer in popular understanding, Satan in the classical demonological tradition is a separate entity, the embodiment of anger, hatred, and destructive fury. His name means adversary, and he serves as the eternal opponent of peace, harmony, and constructive resolution. Satan's wrath is not the hot anger of passion, but the cold fury of calculated destruction. He represents the decision to tear down rather than build up, to destroy rather than create, to oppose rather than cooperate. His influence turns righteous anger into destructive rage, justified criticism into bitter hatred, and natural competitiveness into the desire to dominate and destroy. In the infernal hierarchy, Satan commands legions of demons who specialize in conflict and division. They sow discord in families, communities, and nations, turning natural differences into irreconcilable oppositions. They understand that wrath is most effective when it feels justified, when destruction can be rationalized as necessary justice. The seven princes do not work in isolation, but form a complex web of mutual support and reinforcement. Pride enables greed by justifying the accumulation of wealth as deserved. Greed fuels lust by reducing relationships to transactions. Lust feeds gluttony by treating all appetites as equally valid. Gluttony enables sloth by overwhelming the system with excess. Sloth nurtures envy by preventing the effort needed to improve one's situation. Envy justifies wrath by providing targets for destructive anger. Together, these seven princes represent a complete system for the corruption of human nature, each addressing a different aspect of the human condition, and each providing pathways that seem reasonable, even beneficial, but ultimately lead to spiritual destruction. Their power lies not in their ability to force compliance, but in their deep understanding of human psychology and their skill at presenting destructive choices as attractive alternatives. The classical grimoires describe elaborate hierarchies beneath each prince, with dukes, marquises, counts, and legions of lesser demons, all serving in the great work of temptation and corruption. Each has specialized knowledge and particular areas of expertise, creating a bureaucracy of evil as complex and organized as any earthly government. The influence of the seven princes extends beyond individual temptation to encompass the corruption of entire cultures and civilizations. Their work can be seen in the rise and fall of empires, in the recurring patterns of human history, and in the persistent tendency of even the most idealistic movements to become corrupted by the very evils they set out to oppose. Lucifer's pride corrupts leaders and visionaries, turning them from servants of their people into tyrants concerned only with their own glory. Mammon's greed corrupts economic systems, turning tools for human flourishing into engines of exploitation and inequality. Asmodeus's lust corrupts relationships and families, turning love into possession and intimacy into performance. Beelzebub's gluttony corrupts entire cultures, creating societies based on endless consumption rather than meaningful achievement. Belphegor's sloth corrupts institutions, turning them from instruments of progress into obstacles to change. Leviathan's envy corrupts social movements, turning the desire for justice into the pursuit of revenge. Satan's wrath corrupts the very concept of justice itself, turning the desire for right order into the lust for dominance and the destruction of enemies. Together, the seven princes create and maintain systems of corruption that persist across generations, becoming so normalized that they are accepted as inevitable aspects of human nature. Yet the classical tradition also speaks of the ultimate limitation of the princes' power. For all their cunning and might, they remain dependent on human choice for their victories. They can tempt, suggest, and present attractive alternatives, but they cannot force the human will to choose evil. Their power is real but not absolute, formidable but not irresistible. The seven princes of hell represent humanity's attempt to understand and categorize the forces that seem to work against human flourishing and spiritual development. Whether viewed as literal supernatural entities or as symbolic representations of psychological and social forces, they provide a framework for understanding the systematic nature of evil and corruption. Their enduring fascination lies in their recognition of fundamental truths about human nature and the human condition. They acknowledge that evil is not random or chaotic, but follows predictable patterns, that corruption is not accidental, but systematic, and that the forces working against human flourishing are as organized and purposeful as those working for it. In the end, the 7 princes of hell serve as dark mirrors reflecting the human capacity for both greatness and degradation. They remind us that the same creative powers that can build civilizations and create beauty can also destroy and corrupt. They represent the eternal choice that faces every human soul, whether to serve forces that build up or forces that tear down, whether to choose the difficult path of growth and service or the seemingly easier path of self-indulgence and destruction. Their names echo through history, not as mere superstition, but as persistent reminders of the dark potentials that exist within every human heart, and the eternal vigilance required to choose light over darkness, creation over destruction, and love over the corruption of love that is the ultimate work of the princes of hell.